Elena had never believed in ghost stories or local legends. She was the type who soared through life on logic and reason. But when her anthropology professor assigned a final project to investigate and document a modern local urban legend, she found herself drawn to a rumor swirling around her hometown in the high desert. It centered on an abandoned house along the old Route 66, a crumbling structure nestled amid tumbleweeds and rusting road signs. Locals cautioned that it was more than an eyesore. Some spoke in whispers of a serial killer who once holed up there, using it as a slaughterhouse for travelers. Others insisted the place was cursed, that a dark presence still haunted its corridors. Yet no official records existed to confirm any murders. The single consistent warning among them was this: if you step inside after sundown, you will never be seen again. Elena, a budding anthropologist, found it a perfect subject for her project. She intended to gather local lore, interview townspeople about the old Route 66 horrors, possibly snap pictures of the interior. Her professor demanded original research on a functioning legend, and the house on Route 66 definitely fit. The rumors so alarmed people that few dared approach even in daylight. Elena's academic instincts told her it was merely a myth amplified by folksy tradition. After all, Route 66 was dotted with decaying buildings, each with its own tall tales of ghosts or criminals. She believed if there had been a real serial killer, official evidence or newspaper archives would exist. Nonetheless, she couldn't resist the lure of unraveling the house's mystique. So, on a bright Thursday morning, she hopped into her battered pickup, determined to explore and gather data. She told her best friend, Jay, who insisted on joining. Jay, half thrill seeker, half skeptic, believed an on-site exploration might yield juicy photos for Elena's project. Neither fully believed they were stepping into real danger. Yet the seed of rumor lingered in Elena's mind. Even if no killer still roamed the premises, the air of ominous hush around that place spelled potential for, if nothing else, a chilling academic paper. They had no inkling how quickly curiosity can morph into a nightmare. The old Route 66 near Elena's hometown was a dead stretch, bypassed decades ago by new interstates. Most travelers forgot the dusty road even existed. Weeds grew between cracks. Weathered billboards advertised defunct motels. Past the half-collapsed diner sign reading "All Good Eats," they found the abandoned house, perched on a slight rise. The front porch sagged, windows boarded. A battered "No Trespassing" sign hung crooked on the rotted fence. Desert wind kicked up grit, stinging their eyes. Elena cut the engine and stepped out, camera in hand. Jay followed, scanning the horizon. "So this is it," Jay muttered. Indeed, it was underwhelming at first glance. Just another decaying property. But as they approached, something about the place exuded a quiet menace, like the building was half awake, watching. The front yard was more dirt patch than lawn. Tumbleweeds pressed against the house's side. A single dead tree loomed behind it, branches contorted. They decided to do a quick external survey, snap pictures, circle around. The backyard was similarly bleak, with scraps of rusted metal, what might have been a chicken coop. On the rear door hung an old lock, easily pried open if needed. Elena, ever rational, said they'd first gather interviews from locals before entering. No sense risking the interior if it was structurally unsafe. Jay nodded, but the tension in the air was unmistakable, as if something or someone peered from the cracks. They recorded the location details, then retreated to the truck. The entire time, not a single passing car disturbed them, as though the house existed in a pocket of deserted time. Elena felt a slight chill, pushing it off as desert wind. The next few days, Elena and Jay scoured the local diner, bar, library, fishing for stories. The older residents were quick to hush each other if asked about the Route 66 house. Some got up and left, refusing to speak. A few, mostly younger folks, offered tidbits gleaned from older relatives. Back in the 1960s, rumor says a drifter lived there, picking off hitchhikers. But nobody found bodies. They say a local deputy tried investigating, then disappeared himself. Lights appear in the windows at midnight, flickering like someone's pacing inside. They found no consistent name for the rumored killer. Some called him Sawyer, others Lane. A few insisted multiple killers used the property across decades. Others said the house itself was cursed, a magnet for evil, long before the alleged murders. A single diner regular told them in hushed tones, "Stay away after sundown, or the house will claim you." The man's eyes flicked with genuine fear. He said a cousin of his once boasted of exploring the place at night, vanishing entirely the next day. The police chalked it up to a runaway, but the old man swore the house devoured him. Elena's academic logic struggled with the contradictory details, but the uniform terror was undeniable. She wrote extensive notes, sensing the legend's power in the local psyche. Jay, half enthralled, suggested they do a daylight exploration inside, but Elena held off, wanting more background. She visited the county records, searching old property deeds. She discovered the house dated to the 1920s, built by a rancher family who left no official sale records after 1955. No mention of murder, except a minor newspaper snippet from 1978 about a missing hitchhiker last seen near Route 66. Hardly conclusive. Yet the dread among locals was real, unwavering. Some believed the serial killer might still be there, an immortal figure or a copycat picking up victims whenever the opportunity arose. Others suspected ghosts. By day 5, Elena had enough secondhand stories. She concluded the house's interior might hold clues, some leftover evidence or old diaries. Jay agreed. Both decided to conduct a thorough midday exploration. If it felt safe, maybe they'd do a quick night trip for dramatic effect. They brushed off the never return warning as exaggerated folklore. They had each other, cameras, flashlights, plus logic on their side. Right? Late Monday morning, bright sunlight hammered the desert. Perfect conditions. No illusions from gloom. Elena and Jay parked outside the house again, retrieving backpacks with water, flashlights, a crowbar, and a voice recorder for commentary. The front door was boarded, so they circled to the back. Using the crowbar, Jay pried off the old lock. The door screeched open onto a musty kitchen. The smell was immediate, decaying wood, rodent droppings, stale air. Dust motes swirled in the sunlight streaming from cracks in the boarded windows. Camera rolling. Elena stepped inside. The floor squeaked ominously but felt stable enough. The kitchen was small, counters layered with grime, a rusted sink. She photographed everything meticulously. Jay rummaged through broken cupboards, finding only spiderwebs. No sign of squatters or immediate danger. So far, so normal. They advanced into the living room. The discolored walls bore faint outlines where pictures once hung. A battered sofa lay overturned. Glass shards from a shattered coffee table crunched underfoot. Jay noticed a pile of old newspapers near a corner. They rummaged through them. Most dated to the 1970s. Local headlines about Route 66 businesses closing. Nothing about murders. Yet each page's edges bore scribbled notes in pen, random words like fear, blood. They come at night. Could be the ramblings of a drifter. Then they discovered a door leading to a hallway with 3 rooms, presumably bedrooms. The hush pressed heavier here, as if the house's heart lay in these corridors. They found the first bedroom mostly empty. Cracked mirror on the floor. Rotted mattress. The second was locked from inside. Jay forced it open. The interior reeked of mold. On the dresser sat a single photograph in a broken frame, a black and white image of a man in overalls. Face blurred by time. Scrawled on the back, "He is watching." A chill danced across Elena's spine. Suddenly, Jay froze. Turning to Elena. "Did you hear that?" Elena listened. Footsteps overhead? The second floor was presumably an attic or partial loft. They locked eyes. Hearts pounding. The footstep sounds continued. A slow, deliberate pacing. Could an animal have gotten in? Or was someone actually upstairs? Trying to rationalize, Elena and Jay approached the stairs near the front hall. The door to the second floor was half off its hinges. They crept up, flashlights scanning each step. The boards groaned. The hush thickened, tension coiling like a spring. The footsteps overhead ceased as if the occupant realized they were coming. At the top, they found a cramped attic corridor, strewn with debris. A single door stood at the corridor's end, slightly ajar. The stench of mildew was strong, layered with something sour. Jay whispered, "We should call out, in case it's just a homeless person." But Elena shook her head. Fearing a confrontation with an unstable occupant, they advanced quietly. A single side window let in enough sunlight to see dust swirling. The hush nearly roared in her ears. Reaching the door, Jay gently nudged it open. The flashlight beam revealed a small, messy space with a tattered sleeping bag, empty cans, and pinned photos on the walls, photos of random strangers from decades of Route 66 travelers. Some seemed recent. Their eyes collectively widened. This was no mere squatter's nest. This was an obsessive collection, sorted by date or location. Some pictures had red X's scrawled over them. Elena's pulse thundered. The rumor of a killer's lair seemed more real. She took a shaky step forward, scanning the pinned photos. Some victims looked casual, snapped without knowledge. Others depicted them entering or leaving the property. A few pictures circled with notes like "Came at midnight." Terrified, Jay pointed to a Polaroid near the door. It showed two silhouettes in front of the house in broad daylight. That was them, Elena and Jay, from their initial external survey days earlier. The hush hammered. Realization sinking in, someone had been watching them, even capturing their photo. They heard a faint rasp behind them. Both whirled. Flashlights jostling. The corridor was empty, but a new cold draft blew. The attic door behind them slammed shut. They rushed to open it, locked from the other side. Panic soared. They pounded, calling out. No answer. The hush pressed in. A swirl of dust from the attic corners made it seem like the walls themselves exhaled. Moments later, the door creaked open by itself. Corridor beyond dark. Someone had manipulated it from outside. They realized they were not alone here, even at midday. Jay, eyes wild, demanded they leave immediately. Forget the rest of the house. Elena, though spooked, rationally agreed. They had enough evidence. They retreated down the stairs quickly. The footsteps overhead resumed, heading to the attic room they'd just vacated, as if tailing them from above. Reaching the first floor, they dashed for the back door, but it was jammed from outside with a heavy object. Jay cursed, trying to force it open. No success. They tried the front door. Still boarded. No easy exit. The hush grew stifling. Desperate, They found a side window half broken. Elena cleared shards, hoisted Jay out first. As Jay landed outside, Elena heard a scuffling behind. She glimpsed a fleeting shape in the hallway, a tall figure in tattered clothes, face half obscured. It hissed, or maybe exhaled a rasp. Elena scrambled out the window, cutting her arm on leftover glass. Ignoring the pain, the hush roared from inside. Once outside, they sprinted to their truck. Jay fumbled for keys, starting the engine. In the rearview mirror, Elena saw no sign of the figure at the window, but a silhouette crossed behind the fence. They peeled away, hearts drumming, dust swirling in their wake. They found safety at a gas station 5 miles away, bandaging Elena's arm and trying to calm. The rumors were true. The house was not merely haunted by ghosts, but possibly still a hideout for a twisted occupant who might be continuing a decades-long legacy of murder. The Polaroids suggested a methodical stalker. They debated calling the police, but local rumors said the authorities always found nothing. Some believed the killer had a hidden warren in the house or catacombs below. Others suspected supernatural elements shielded the occupant. Shaken, they recognized that if the occupant was real, they were dangerously cunning. If the occupant was supernatural, that was even worse. They returned to town, telling a local deputy their story. He frowned, unimpressed. He'd heard tall tales about that place. The deputy asked if they had proof of the occupant's existence. They showed the Polaroid of them pinned to the attic wall. The deputy seemed intrigued, but insisted the house had been searched multiple times over the decades with no conclusive evidence. He half promised to do a drive-by. Elena felt certain that was a dead end. Determined to gather final proof for both her project and for public safety, Elena scoured local library archives again. This time, she found a microfilm mention from 1962. A traveling couple disappeared, last seen near the old Clapton house on 66. Another snippet from 1975 reported a transient claiming he was attacked in that house by a masked figure. Each mention was overshadowed by bigger news, never leading to thorough investigations. The house's name changed over time, but the pattern was consistent: rumors, missing travelers, no resolution. Jay pointed out that the occupant's Polaroid camera spanned decades. The oldest photos they saw in the attic suggested the occupant might be unbelievably old, or a lineage of killers passing down the twisted tradition. Or was it something unstoppable, not quite human? The hush Elena experienced in the corridor felt almost unnatural. Could the occupant be a half-ghost, half-living monster? In a final library crawl, they discovered a fleeting mention that the original builder died under suspicious circumstances, leaving no heirs. The house changed hands, but each new occupant vanished or fled quickly. By the 1950s, it was abandoned for good. None of this guaranteed a modern killer, but it reinforced the notion of a deep, cursed pattern. The scariest possibility: the occupant might be both a real person and something more than human. A serial killer fused with the house's dark presence. Jay and Elena parted ways, each unsettled. But as Elena compiled her notes, she realized her professor's assignment demanded direct evidence of the legend's hold on the community, plus any tangible discovery. She dreaded the thought, yet concluded a nighttime documentation might complete her project. Jay, unbelievably, agreed to come, though fear twisted both stomachs. They rationalized that if they approached stealthily, in and out, they could record videos proving the occupant's presence. Then they'd forward it to the authorities, forcing a real investigation. They waited a few days, planning meticulously. They borrowed better flashlights, a phone with live stream capability, in case they needed to call for help. They also carried pepper spray and a small baton. The local rumors said if you enter after sundown, you never return, but they believed they'd be the exception with their caution. On a moonless Saturday, they set out around 9 p.m. Hearts pounding. The drive along Route 66 was eerily silent. The house emerged from the darkness, silhouette stark against starless sky. Parking half a mile away, they approached on foot, hoping to avoid alerting the occupant. The hush in the desert pressed on them, as if the entire night conspired with the house. Reaching the yard, they found the side window still broken. They crept inside carefully, flashlights scanning the same kitchen. Except now, everything felt infinitely more menacing under flickering beams. The hush was absolute, each footstep echoing. They whispered, "We record, gather proof, then leave." The plan was to slip into the living room, document the photos in the attic, then retreat. But the house had changed. The living room's furniture was rearranged, the sofa upright instead of overturned. The floor was cleared of shards. A single candle flickered in the corner. Unexplainably, Jay's eyes widened, adrenaline spiking. Elena felt her spine prickle. The occupant definitely moved about. A faint odor of decay lingered, stronger than before. They advanced, tense, into the hallway. The hush grew oppressive. At the foot of the attic stairs, they hesitated. The overhead darkness seemed alive, as though waiting. Then a sudden noise from the second bedroom caught their attention. A creak, like a door opening. They turned. Shining lights. The bedroom door was half ajar. A corridor beyond was black. They approached, trembling. The hush roiled, stifling each breath. Jay reached for the doorknob, only for it to swing inward on its own, revealing the occupant inside. In the flashlight beam, they glimpsed a tall figure wearing tattered, dusty clothes. The face was hidden behind a bizarre makeshift mask, a pale ceramic half mask, the rest wrapped in old cloth. The eyes behind it glowed with a cold, predatory light. The figure clutched something, a blade glinting faintly. Elena's scream froze in her throat. The occupant emitted a rasping hiss. Stepping forward, Jay raised the baton, but the occupant seemed unafraid. They retreated instinctively, hearts hammering. The occupant moved with eerie slowness, as though savoring the moment. The hush hammered in their ears, a static tension that pressed them to flee. Jay seized Elena's arm, pulling her back. They sprinted for the front door, hoping to pry it open. The occupant gave chase, footsteps oddly silent yet unnervingly swift. They threw their combined weight at the boarded front door, ripping at nails. A moment later, the occupant lunged, brandishing the blade. Jay swung the baton in panic, striking the figure's side. The occupant barely flinched, only staggering slightly, then unleashed a low guttural sound. The hush soared, as if the house exhaled malevolent glee. The occupant slashed at Jay's shoulder, grazing them lightly. Elena shrieked, rummaging for pepper spray. She fired a short burst at the occupant's mask. The figure recoiled, hissing, stepping back enough for them to yank the boards aside. The occupant recovered swiftly, advancing again. Jay hammered the baton frantically, giving Elena the final second to pull free a panel. They squeezed through the half-open door. The occupant's blade missed them by inches, scraping wood. They stumbled onto the porch, vaulting the rotted railing. The occupant pursued, emerging from the door's gloom, freed from the house interior. They raced across the yard, the occupant closing in alarmingly fast. The hush spread outside, but not as strong, it seemed. Or perhaps adrenaline overcame it. Reaching the fence, they leapt over. The occupant paused at the fence line, half hidden by shadows. For an instant, Elena met the figure's gaze behind that mask of burning hatred. The occupant whispered something unintelligible, voice husky, then retreated into the yard as if bound to the property. Jay and Elena sprinted to the truck, not looking back until they peeled out onto Route 66. Hearts pounding like thunder, they drove in stunned silence, eventually bursting into terrified laughter of relief. But tears crept into that laughter. They narrowly escaped. Their earlier recordings were shaky but real. Enough to prove someone or something resided within. Enough to confirm this was no mere rumor. The occupant was truly continuing a horrifying tradition. They realized the local legend was correct, wandering after sundown. You might never return. They only escaped by a hair's breadth of luck. Plus pepper spray and a baton. They had their proof, but it cost them nightmares for the rest of their lives. Days later, they showed the deputy their footage. He paled, seeing the masked figure. But official action proved complicated. The property was in legal limbo. The local station was short-staffed, uninterested in exploring a haunted rumor. A junior officer promised to escalate it. But weeks passed with no official update. The occupant presumably remained at large. The house still unsealed. The hush still lurking. Elena finished her project, receiving top marks. Albeit her professor was rattled by the raw fear in Elena's voice on the recordings. The professor advised caution distributing it publicly, citing potential safety concerns. Elena complied, reluctant to provoke the occupant further. Rumors flared in town that a traveler's car was found abandoned near the house. No sign of the driver. People whispered that the occupant had claimed another life. The hush about that place grew deeper, reinforced by new warnings. Do not approach the house on Route 66 after dark. Some insisted the occupant was a mortal who only preyed on naive explorers. Others claimed it was a demon wearing a man's form, continuing a century of murders in that cursed structure. For Elena, the truth remained hazy. She had glimpsed enough to suspect something beyond normal brutality. The hush weighed more heavily than a mere psycho's presence. Like the house itself breathed malevolence. Jay tried to put it behind them, returning to daily routines. Yet nightmares lingered. Flashbacks to the occupants' hiss. They considered organizing an armed group to storm the house in daylight. But no volunteers emerged. Locals wanted nothing to do with it. Ultimately, the secret endured. The occupant, or serial killer, or demon, still lurked in that rotting building by the desert highway. One late evening, Elena was working on her laptop when her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered, half expecting a telemarketer. A raspy voice asked, "Why did you come to my house that night?" Her blood froze. She recognized that hush behind the voice. She stammered, "What? Who is this?" The voice gave a low laugh. "I saw you escape once. You won't be so lucky next time." Then the line disconnected. She dropped her phone in horror. The occupant had her number, possibly from the phone in her pocket or from rummaging local data. It signaled that their presence was known, their trespass not forgiven. She realized she might never be fully safe. At 3 a.m. that night, she woke to scraping outside her apartment door. She dared not open it. The hush was faint, but real. In the morning, no sign of forced entry. Jay insisted she move away, or at least install extra locks. She did, but paranoia gnawed at her. Each shadow in the hallway, each sudden hush at midnight, made her relive the occupant's cold stare. The occupant might just be toying with her, or waiting for a final moment to pounce. 1 month later, rumors surfaced of a new disappearance. A group of teenage thrill-seekers boasted on social media about braving the house on Route 66 at night. They never posted an update. Their parents found their car near the old diner. No trace of the kids. The hush overcame the town's residents again, each recalling the occupants' unstoppable reign. Elena's guilt soared, wishing her project had effectively deterred others rather than stoking curiosity. But the unstoppable lure of urban legends ensured a constant trickle of daredevils. As time passed, Elena realized the occupant's existence was not a fleeting rumor but a persistent manifestation of evil. The house continued to stand, battered yet intact, claiming the occasional unwary traveler. The occupant or occupant's lineage maintained the tradition of preying on those who crossed the threshold after dark. Local law enforcement, either incompetent or under-resourced, never resolved the house's secrets. Elena wrestled with nightmares, half expecting the occupant to appear in her bedroom or ambush her while grocery shopping. The hush never fully left her psyche. She turned her experiences into a cautionary dissertation on modern-day legends, concluding that some myths exist not to be solved but to keep people away from cursed places. She ended with the chilling note, "I survived because I fled fast enough." But the house remains, hungry for more. One late autumn evening, Elena received a cryptic text from an unknown number, "We want you back at the house to finish your story." Her heart hammered. She recognized the occupant's undertones. She never responded, instead shutting her phone off. She realized no matter how far she ran, the occupant's shadow remained in her nightmares. Part of her suspected that if she returned, she'd either put an end to it or vanish like the others. But she refused to volunteer for that fate. Thus the legend persists, a deserted home along a forgotten stretch of Route 66, rumored to house an ageless killer or a malevolent spirit. A place where travelers vanish if they enter after sundown, leaving only dust and whispered caution in their wake. Locals keep the story quiet, warning only close friends. But as curiosity draws new explorers, the occupant always welcomes fresh prey, the hush intensifying as unsuspecting footsteps cross the threshold. And if you ever find yourself driving Route 66 at twilight, remember that sagging porch and boarded windows are more than an eyesore. They might be your last stop. For once the hush envelopes you, no one can guarantee your safe return from the house on Route 66.